It's been just over 8 decades since war came to Australia. Since then, we've fought and died in many a battle, all far from home. So can it happen again? Yes. With China's continuing push into the Western Pacific, the prospect of conflict in our region has never been higher, which raises some very real questions. Can Australia defend itself? And are we ready for war?
Are we ready for war?
I don't think we are.
We've got a time period now where we must prepare for the worst case.
We would probably be looking at losses that we haven't seen since the Second World War.
Some of Australia's finest military minds are worried.
This is a national challenge that Australia has.
Former Major General Mick Ryan is one of them.
We face a range of cyber, economic, informational, political, diplomatic and military challenges with the coercion of the Chinese Communist Party that are well beyond anything we've seen before. It is a national challenge, not just a military one.
And former Major General, the late Senator Jim Molan, shares that concern.
Because we've fundamentally been at peace for 80 years, many people find a serious war beyond their comprehension. Ask the Ukrainians. And people have often said to me, China wouldn't be that stupid, would they? Ask the Russians.
Jim, there's been a recent shift in tone coming from China. Do you truly believe that the relationship is thawing?
No, I don't believe the relationship is thawing because the issues for China are far, far bigger than a simple relationship with Australia.
Finally, allow me to propose a toast.
It's been a long time between drinks for Beijing and Canberra.
If you have a glass of wine or drink in your hands, otherwise...
In 2023, Chinese Ambassador Zhao Quan was toasting the new year with a glass of Australian red.
To your health, to the friendship between China and Australia. Cheers.
The ambassador was blunt. A change of government in Canberra has led to a changed relationship with Beijing.
We had a turnaround last year. Turnaround from falling behind to stability. And from stability perhaps to improvement, upholding and even development.
And in 2014, it was President Xi Jinping raising a glass to then Prime Minister Tony Abbott. Back then, our relationship with China was at an all-time high. Trade was booming, our leaders were talking, and then it all unravelled big time. From national security issues to those trade sanctions that were brought on by the Morrison government calling out China over COVID, the relationship hit rock bottom. And even though recently there's been a thawing of tensions, there is still one issue that looms large, and it's one Australia can't avoid: Taiwan.
On Formosa, renamed Taiwan, nationalist China is ready.
Taiwan separated from Communist China in 1949, and it's been a fraught and uncertain relationship ever since.
Have made Communist China an emerging superpower.
Now, it's potentially the greatest flashpoint in global politics, and one that could have the greatest impact on the rest of the world.
The issues for China are enormous at the moment. China wants to be the dominant power in our region, and China wants to reincorporate Taiwan into the People's Republic of China.
October 2022, and it was a big welcome for a big occasion. Xi Jinping was the star attraction at the 20th Communist Party Congress in Beijing. As expected, the week-long event saw him win a third term as leader. Among his many stated goals, taking back Taiwan.
The resolution of the Taiwan issue is a Chinese matter for us Chinese people to decide. We insist on striving for the prospect of peaceful reunification with the greatest sincerity and with the greatest effort. However, we are not committed to abandoning the use of force.
Xi has become a leader who has basically developed the goal that China is going to become the predominant power in the world. And I think that represents trouble for both Australia and the United States.
As a former congressman and White House chief of staff, Leon knows how to lead, which is why he is held in such high esteem, not only in this city, but around the world.
Leon Panetta served under Barack Obama as Secretary of Defense.
Thank you, Mr. President.
His relationship with Xi Jinping dates back to 2012, the year before he took the top job in China. What troubles you most about him moving forward, given your experience with him in the past?
I think it's unpredictability. The fact that we all thought that he would be a much more responsible leader in China and has turned out to be much more autocratic, has raised real concerns about the predictability of where he wants to go.
China is now more powerful than ever, but it also has a lot more at stake. Because if President Xi Jinping delivers on his promise, just like Vladimir Putin did to Ukraine, Xi will have to destroy the very thing he covets, and that's Taiwan itself, because reunification will come at a significant cost.
Xi Jinping has said expressly that he wants Taiwan to be part of Greater China now. How do you think he'd do it? How do you think he'd take it?
Well, he's said it on many, many occasions. I mean, people talk about grey zone warfare. There's nothing grey in his statements. They're very black and white. He wants Taiwan back, and he wants to do it in his lifetime. It's his manifest destiny in many respects.
That destiny rests on Xi reigning supreme in China. On the eve of the party congress that re-elected him, former Chinese leader Hu Jintao was removed from the event, seen by many as another power play by the president.
Xi Jinping assumed his presidency in the third term in a process that is not transparent. And he basically tried to eliminate all his political opponents.
I've come to the capital, Taipei, to meet with the man who has the toughest job in international diplomacy.
Good morning.
Good to see you in person.
Good to see you in person too. Thank you for your time. I've been looking forward to talking to you since we last spoke, actually, yeah.
Joseph Wu is Taiwan's foreign minister.
In this moment, how are relations between Taiwan and China?
Not very good. You can probably flash back to August when Speaker Pelosi visited Taiwan, and the Chinese just reacted disproportionately through its military might. They also fired the missiles over Taiwan, and they also conducted disinformation campaign, cognitive warfare, and also economic coercion against Taiwan. And we haven't fully recovered. And the Chinese tactics is trying to create a new normal.
So what is the status quo now?
The status quo is that Taiwan is a democracy, and Taiwan and China do not have jurisdiction over each other.
But Ambassador Zhao says that's simply not the case.
In this world, there's only one China, and now the People's Republic of China is representing the whole of China. And Taiwan was part of China and is still part of China.
This is truly a David and Goliath scenario. Taiwan has a population of 24 million. China, 1.4 billion. And the two are just 160 kilometres apart, separated by one of the most important shipping lanes in the world, the Taiwan Strait.
Recently, there has been a shift in tone from President Xi Jinping. What do you put that down to?
He said several things. The first thing is that the Chinese officials, especially the foreign policy officials, need to dare to struggle. And to us, that seems to be quite alarming. And he also put it in his work report, that Taiwan belongs to the Chinese people. And he also said that China would never promise to renounce the use of force against Taiwan. So if you put all this together, China seems to be preparing for a military assault against Taiwan.
This is not just speculation on the part of Joseph Wu. He points to the dramatic increase in China's military presence in Taiwanese territory.
If you look at China's long-term military trajectory, it's been threatening Taiwan more and more and more. In 2020, they have about 380 sorties of their military airplane. And in 2021, they had 970 of them. And for this year, they already have 2,700 sorties violating our immediate vicinity. So this kind of military threat is increasing. And we are concerned that China might feel that they are confident enough to use military force against Taiwan without too much opposition. And if they have that kind of confidence, they may attack Taiwan at any time.
We've been patiently waiting for more than 7 decades, and we've been waiting peacefully for peaceful relocation.
We have always thought that the Chinese timeline for incorporating Taiwan by force or by other means was maybe about within 4 years from now.
我宣布，中俄海上联合2022。
The year 2027 holds great significance for President Xi. It will be the 100th anniversary of the People's Liberation Army. It could also see him re-elected to an unprecedented 4th term as leader.
Is Taiwan ready for war?
Well, I do not think that we are ready for war right now, but definitely we are about to be ready for war.
Dr. Lei Chung is the director of Taiwan's Department of Chinese Affairs. He says the government is workshopping all possible plans by Beijing.
We are talking about the Chinese, the Air Force, as also the blockade by the sea. Those are the things that are very possible employed by China to cut off Taiwan from our fuel, our energy, and also the food resources and all those. Despite that, we are preparing for the stockpile to meet the situation like those.
And you're preparing for that now?
Yeah, we have to prepare for everything.
From their fighter jets at the Hsinchu Air Base to their warships at sea. It appears that Taiwan is preparing for the worst. And make no mistake, they'll be coming up against the biggest military force in the world.
The Chinese PLA has 975,000 troops at its disposal. Taiwan's got roughly 90,000, give or take, is that right?
We have 150,000 military personnel.
150,000. As opposed to 1 million, though?
Opposed to 1 million, yes.
Just a fraction.
If you look at the sheer number, of course, that is a contrast. But for the Chinese to be able to transport their military personnel over the Taiwan Strait, and the ships crossing the water can be a target.
Even after all of that, if Xi's forces manage to get on the ground here, what comes next is arguably the hardest part: urban warfare. Taiwan is one of the most densely populated parts of the world where street fights would have to take place through these narrow alleyways and built-up neighbourhoods. If history's taught us anything, victory is anything but assured.
If it comes down to urban warfare, how long realistically could you hold them off?
We don't try to calculate how long we can last. The determination is that we will fight as long as it takes.
What sort of help will you need?
The need will be for us to continue to stockpile the ammunitions and weapons that we need for Taiwan self-defense, and we have been doing that right now.
Do you have concerns that American weapons at the moment are going to Ukraine, leaving you short perhaps?
We have seen reports on that, but we are engaging in very serious discussions with the US side to make sure that the weapons are in steady supply to Taiwan.
I do not think there's any imminent attempt on the part of China to invade Taiwan.
At the G20 meeting in Indonesia, Joe Biden met with his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping.
I didn't find him more confrontational or more conciliatory. I found him the way he's always been, direct and straightforward.
But 3 months earlier, the US president was just as direct when questioned about Taiwan in a primetime interview in America.
Would U.S. forces defend the island?
Yes, if in fact there was an unprecedented attack.
So unlike Ukraine, to be clear, sir, U.S. forces, U.S. men and women, would defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion?
Yes.
Well, President Biden has made very clear that the United States would in fact move to defend Taiwan and deploy our military forces into Taiwan in order to protect them. I think that pretty much makes clear that the United States will in fact go to war if necessary in order to protect Taiwan.
Which brings us to a critical point for Australia. Where do we stand if the US ends up with a war on its hands over Taiwan?
If the US goes in, do we then have to?
I think it would be extraordinarily difficult for Australia not to. I mean, the United States has invested decades in this relationship. Australian geography alone makes us a really critical partner to the United States in any Taiwanese contingency, because it is almost impossible to conceive that such a conflict would be restricted to Taiwan.
If China takes Taiwan, do we have to go in?
That's a question for the government of the day. Of course, we have alliance obligations with the United States. We don't have a closer security partner than the United States. We fought and bled together over the last century.
We face very complex strategic circumstances, and the world is much more fragile now than it has been for a long time. That is the reality of the world in which we are living, and we are seeing a great power contest.
And from a man who had seen his fair share of military action, joining forces with America will come at a cost.
The most basic expectation is that we share the burden, and the biggest burden is casualties. If you're going to fight beside the Americans, you will take casualties. So whether it's in Iraq or Afghanistan or in a future Taiwan scenario, there will be significant casualties. And they know who their allies are that are prepared to really stand shoulder to shoulder with them. And that's the key thing.